What is up, you guys? So a bombshell was dropped on Monday when I was looking on Instagram and X, and I came across some news regarding the UH men's basketball team, and it is above and beyond good news. I'm going to get to that shortly, but first of all, guys, remember, subscribe if you think that I'm worth listening to, or if you just want to see some more of my games. I did a live stream yesterday, and I will have that game posted on Tuesday with graphics included. And in the meantime, I hope you all enjoyed that. And you do enjoy this video. So I'm going to get to that right now. So remember, subscribe if you think that I'm worth listening to, or if you just want to see some more of my games. But in the meantime, let's get into this. Here comes my banner. Here's the bombshell. Gytis Nemeikša returns to UH men's basketball's 2025-26 roster. This is the good news that I was definitely not expecting to see out of the UH men's basketball team. Now, we're going to hit the rewind button a little bit here, because way back in the spring, back around March or early April, UH men's basketball did not qualify for the Big West tournament. And hence, ergo, that led to a second mass exodus from the University of Hawaii men's basketball team. As a result, as many as a half dozen guys said adios to UH, aside from, or I should say, including the grad transfers, except for one. And you are seeing it on this banner. That's Gytis Nemeikša. The guy averaged 12 points and about 5 or 6 rebounds per game. And he was also the leading scorer for UH coming off the bench. And the unfortunate part was, after UH did not qualify for the Big West tournament, like I said, as many as a half dozen players had entered the portal. Players like Akira Jacobs, Kody Williams, and Tom Beattie, just to name a few. And those are 3 guys there that were important cogs in this machine, as Scott Robbs would say on the Spectrum broadcasts. By the way, shout out to them. By the way, shout out to him. So those 3 that I mentioned were important cogs in the machine this past season, as were the grad transfers: Jerome Palm, Marcus Greene, and Tanner Christensen, and Gytis Nemeikša. And what that means for UH is that they got their lead scorer back because of a waiver that was passed by the NCAA in about November, I believe, or October or November, that did allow certain players like Marcus Greene and Gytis Nemeikša an additional senior season. And fortunately, they both took them. But unfortunately, Gytis Nemeikša is the only guy who's coming back to the University of Hawaii. Now, back in March, Nemeikša was one of over a half dozen players to enter the portal. And the only other, or I should say, as for Jerome Palm and Marcus Greene, Jerome Palm has since landed at Kansas, and Marcus Greene and Akira Jacobs have transferred to Fordham on the East Coast. Tom Beattie is transferring to UC San Diego. And that, to me, is a bit of a head scratcher when you consider all the in-conference transfers going around, and UH has become the victim of one, which is unfortunate. But if you're talking about other sports, this is actually not very rare, because when you look at softball, Jada Nielsen was on UH. She transferred to CSUN. And, of course, Addison Kostrancic, she was on Long Beach State. She transferred to UH. And Karis Murakami, local girl, was on the CSUN roster. She transferred to UH. So other sports it's not as rare, but of course in basketball, it is a bit of a head scratcher because like I said before in a prior video, if UH men's basketball is going to get an in-conference transfer, the only way that they're going to do that is probably as if the guy is from the islands. And one guy who fits that criteria is on the UC Santa Barbara roster, and that's Zion Sensley. That's Julian Sensley's son. And Julian Sensley was a player for the UH men's basketball team over 20 years ago when I was in high school, mind you. And Julian Sensley was paired up with Iolani graduate Bobby Nash. And those two were the two local guys who really represented the islands well back then. And, of course, Sensley had that game-winning three against Fairfield in 2003. Bobby Nash with a couple of game-winning threes of his own, a buzzer beater against ORU, and a game-winning or a game-tying triple against Rice in 2005. I remember all those because I recorded those on VHS. So, anyway, back to this one. Gytis Nemeikša coming back. Now you don't know the reasoning behind it, but odds are that Gytis Nemeikša got overlooked by every other school that was looking for top talent. And unfortunately which is unfortunate for Gytis because you never know if NIL could have played into why he decided to transfer or if he didn't want to be on the roster for UH anymore. But again, no one knows the reasoning, especially me. Now, again, this is only speculation. But to hear Gytis Nemeikša coming back for this season is a total breath of fresh air. You know, you look at other guys who got additional seasons, you don't have to go back very far because Juan Munoz is another example of this because Juan Munoz was on the UH roster for 3 seasons. 2 of those were cut short due to injury. In 2021-22 and, of course, 22-23. He had a knee injury 2 seasons ago and an Achilles the following season. And then Munoz decided to send in a waiver to the NCAA to grant an additional season, and that would have been Munoz's 8th season of college basketball. And for college basketball players to be in that long, Munoz had even said, according to what I watched on KHON2, their sports reports, Munoz had said that he had loved the sport too much to give it up. But when you consider all the injuries that Juan Munoz went through, nobody would have blamed Munoz for deciding to hang up his shoes. But for Gytis Nemeikša's case, good on the NCAA because Gytis would certainly be a great holdover for next season if he chose to come back. Now, when I heard he entered the portal, I thought that waiver meant that if he had decided to stay at UH, that he wouldn't get that additional season. But it turns out that's not the case. As of yesterday, when that bombshell was dropped. Now, you never know if all of his potential schools had overlooked Gytis, or he felt like he had something left to prove after what happened last season when UH did not qualify for the Big West tournament. Now we got a revamped roster with a lot of new faces. And Gytis Nemeikša is only the 3rd player returning to the roster because the other 2, Harry Ruliadev and Aaron Hunkin-Clater. Now, I'm going to look for big things from Aaron Hunkin-Clater for next season. Same goes with Harry Ruliadev. I expect him to be named a senior captain, or at least or team captain at least, because this is his final season. And for Gytis Nemeikša, I would expect the same. I would expect or highly suspect that he's going to get a captain role. For someone like Gytis, it's a transfer from Xavier. We actually turned them back, I believe, in 2011 in the Diamond Head Classic, by the way. Little interesting fact there. For someone like Gytis to play at a school that prestigious, that tells you that he's got talent somewhere. And he proved it last season. He was pretty good from three-point range. The only guy that wasn't able to get a was Tanner Christensen. The only guy who was not able to get an additional season because Christensen was not part of that waiver. Or not part of that waiver, but not in those players who qualified to be part of that waiver. Because Marcus Greene was part of that. I'm not sure how that really came to be. But the little bit that I know of is that those players who are given that second season had to have been part of a school that wasn't part of the NCAA at some time in their careers. So that meant that Gytis Nemeikša and Marcus Greene would get additional senior seasons. Now, I'm definitely hoping that Gytis will be a key factor. In fact, I know he's going to be a key factor because my dad has said before that Gytis reminded him a lot of Predrag Savovich when he was here way back when. He wasn't athletic, but he was always in the right place at the right time with a lot of the tip-ins. And as you can see on some of my, and as you saw on some of my other videos, that Gytis had tipped in shots from guys like Ryan Rapp, Tom Beattie, and Tanner Christensen. So for Gytis to return is a big holdover. Now, are we going to have a championship in us? I like to think so. But then again, you also can't discount your competitors, and that's what I'm certainly not doing, because anybody can have a great game, or any team can have another great opponent or a great pickup to have that, to continue to have that success continue. Like Santa Barbara, they had Stefan Swenson on their roster after A.J. Mitchell drafted for the NBA. And unfortunately, UH was still not able to turn back UC Santa Barbara. But do I think that's going to change this season? I sure hope so. Because that's 6 times in a row UH has lost to Santa Barbara. So, am I saying that Gytis back on the roster is going to make all the difference in the world? No, but obviously it does take a team effort. But having Gytis back will certainly fill in a lot of those voids. Now, other guys that were picked up for this season include someone who was on the Niagara roster from 2 seasons ago, and that's Quandre Bullock, a.k.a. Dre Bullock. He was on the Niagara roster, and also other pickups, Isaac Finlinson and Isaac Johnson, just to name a couple. And also somebody else I can't quite put on my finger. His name is on the tip of my tongue, but all I know is that he's a grad transfer, and this is going to be his final season, along with Dre Bullock. And it's good to have a familiar name on our roster, because you don't often hear about players that on a team that we face who chose to transfer here. You know, I can remember when we were in the WAC, Keith Schamberger was on the San Jose State roster, and he transferred to UH for 1 season, and then he ended up transferring to Missouri, which was unfortunate for us because that was probably the last in-conference transfer that I can think of off the top of my head, and that was when we were in the WAC. in the Western Athletic Conference, just to clarify that. So, obviously, this is a great bit of news with Gytis Nemeikša. I really like watching that kid, and I fully agree with my dad when he says that he reminds him a lot of Predrag Savovich. And I'm in agreement there, too. And hopefully that this means that we got a championship in us. Now, obviously, Irvine, despite their great run all the way to the NIT, they ended up losing Miles Che to the transfer portal. And I don't know where he ended up at. I'm not even following him on Instagram either. But still, regardless, I think with this roster, UH is going to have a fighting chance to not only make the tournament, but maybe finish in the top 5. Because as of right now, I think UH has got at least a 5th place in them. But the problem is, if you're looking for quality point guards, we had Roderick Bobbitt almost 10 years ago, and Bobbitt was the clear point guard in the words of head coach Eran Ganot. Now, obviously, what is this going to mean for Ganot's tenure at UH? I don't know. But I will have his back for sure. And those on Instagram and YouTube, or I should say Instagram, Twitter, or any other social media platform who say that Ganot's got to go, I don't believe that for 2 seconds. The guy knows what he's doing. We've just run into some bad luck. And really, the guy can recruit. I believe in Ganot just as much as the next person. But all I know for sure is that getting rid of Ganot is not the answer. Never was and never will be. Now, my evidence to that, you look at how he was able to recruit some good players like Juan Munoz and Jerome DeRosier. That proves that Ganot's got some confidence and recruitment in his recruitment. And obviously it didn't work out last season. One guy we missed a lot of was Roy Igwe, another transfer another recruit from Japan. But we only saw him in one game because he was out with a knee injury. And unfortunately, we won't know how good Roy Igwe would have been because he ended up leaving the program to turn. And that's really unfortunate, too. Because I thought we were really in for a good season after how the Diamond Head Classic went. But after we lost to CSUN by 23, that's pretty much when the wheels for the season came off. Excuse me. And that's where I'll leave it. So, so just to summarize, Gytis Nemeikša had entered the transfer portal. He has since withdrawn, and he will return and be a Rainbow Warrior for one more season. And that's a major, major smile in our hearts for sure. And we'll find out how good that some of these pickups. Oh, now I remember that guy I was trying to think of, Jalen Myers. We'll see how good he will be along with the others like Isaac Johnson, nicknamed Big Fish, and also Isaac Finlinson or Ike Finlinson. And, of course, another guy that we also got to not forget about is another guy who's currently serving a church mission, Scotty Belknap. Now, this guy is a recruitment to UH, and he even has said, according to what I saw on KHON2, just to let you know where I got it from, just to make sure I'm not stealing it or anything, just letting you know where I found it. Scotty Belknap has also said that he has had a dream to play for, saw it as a lifelong dream to play for the University of Hawaii. Now, is he any good as Gytis Nemeikša? I don't know, but we'll see what happens. This will be our final season in the Big West before we move to the Mountain West for 2026, 27, and beyond. So hopefully we will have a great final season in the Big West. Will it be a championship winning season? I don't know, but I would be happy with the top 5 anyway. But if they can get a top 3, then they'll exceed my expectations for sure. So anyway, guys, that's all for today. And remember, subscribe, and I'll see you all again.